All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to try to really quickly get you up to speed on what makes a great teacher truly believe in themselves.
And we're taking a pretty unique approach here, going straight to the source.
Yeah, 82 sources to be exact, all research studies on this very topic published between 1977 and 2015. So consider this your crash course in teacher self-efficacy.
And it's not just about teachers having warm fuzzies.
Yeah,
This self-efficacy, it's a big deal. It really impacts how teachers do their jobs, even how their students learn.
right. It's not just like a personality quirk or something.
No, not at all. It goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
This is about a teacher's belief in their own ability to basically handle anything that gets thrown at them in the classroom.
To plan, to
Yeah,
execute, to get their students engaged and learning.
exactly. It's that inner conviction
Yeah.
that I can do this. And that belief, it's like the engine. It drives their motivation, how they approach teaching. It even plays a role in things like burnout and commitment, whether they stick with it or get discouraged.
It even influences how effective they feel they are, right? And all of that trickles down to student achievement.
Yeah, research shows that teacher self-efficacy is linked to all those things and even student achievement. So that's why we're here.
It's a big deal.
It is. It is.
So the question is, where does this belief in themselves come from? What makes some teachers feel so capable, so ready for any challenge, while others might struggle with self-doubt?
Right. Where does it come from? That's what we're diving into, the origins of teacher self-efficacy. What are the sources of this confidence?
And we're not just gonna, kind of skim the surface here. We're gonna look closely at how researchers have conceptualized and measured these sources, how they've tried to figure out this puzzle.
And that's where it gets interesting. One of the things that jumped out right away in this review of all these studies is that despite all the research, there are still some, well, let's call them methodological hiccups that have made it a little murky.
Right. So the research itself, how it's been done, has kind of muddied the waters a bit. It's not as clear-cut as you might think.
Exactly, and that's something to keep in mind as we go deeper.
Mhm.
But to start, let's get back to the basics, the foundation of this whole thing. Bandura's 4 sources of self-efficacy.
Yeah, that's kind of the bedrock here.
Right, so Bandura, he proposed that when we judge our own abilities, we draw on information from 4 main areas. Think of them like the ingredients that go into that feeling of, I can do this.
All right. So let's unpack those ingredients.
Okay. First up, we have mastery experiences. Think of this as your track record of success. Like when you faced a challenge, in this case, a teaching challenge, and you did it, you succeeded because of your own efforts. That becomes powerful evidence for you that you could do it again.
It's not just about participating, right? It's about feeling that sense of, I did that.
Exactly. It's about owning those successes, seeing that direct link between your actions and the outcome. And you know what? It's even more impactful when you've overcome a challenge that felt really tough. Like, the harder it was, the more you think, wow, if I can do that, I can do anything.
So it's like leveling up in a video game, right?
Uh,
You beat the hard level, you feel way more confident going into the next one.
Exactly. It's that sense of accomplishment that boosts your self-belief. But there's a catch, right? If you ace a lesson, but you think, oh, it's because the kids were in a good mood today, or I totally rely on my co-teacher.
This doesn't count as much.
Right. It doesn't have the same impact on your own self-belief. It's about recognizing your role, your contribution to the success. And that's something I want to highlight for you, the listener. If you want to build that I can do this feeling, focus on those moments where you truly feel you made a difference through your own skills and efforts. It's not just about how long you've been teaching, but the quality of those experiences.
It's about those moments where you feel like, yeah, that was me.
Yes,
Let's go.
that was you. All right, on to the second source, vicarious experiences. This is all about learning by watching others succeed, or even watching yourself do well in recordings. It's like learning by example.
So new teachers observing experienced teachers, right?
That's a great example.
Yeah.
And it's especially helpful when you're facing a new challenge, something you're unsure about. Or if you see someone who you feel is similar to you doing it well, it makes you think, well, if they can do it, maybe I can too. It makes success seem more attainable, more relatable.
And I think the idea of coping models is fascinating. These are people who aren't perfect, They might make mistakes, they might struggle a bit, but they keep going and eventually figure it out.
It's more real, more human. It shows that success isn't always smooth sailing, and that's actually encouraging for a lot of people.
It's like, yeah, they messed up a few times, but look at them now.
Exactly. It gives you hope.
That's it.
And then there's also this idea of comparing yourself to others. which Bandura called referential comparisons.
So looking at how you measure up, how you stack up against other teachers?
Exactly. But how this has been measured in research,
Mm.
well, we'll get into that later, and it gets a little complicated.
Okay, so we'll put a pin in that one for now.
Yeah, let's move on to the third source, social persuasions.
This one seems pretty intuitive, right? It's all about the encouragement, the feedback we get from others.
Right. It's that boost you get when your principal tells you how well you handled a tough situation, when a colleague praises your creative lesson plan, or even when a parent expresses gratitude for your dedication. It's those external validations that make you think, hey, I must be doing something right.
Yeah, it's like getting a pat on the back, a little confirmation that you're on the right track.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Not all encouragement is created equal. The impact of a message depends a lot on who's delivering it.
Right. If it's coming from someone you don't really respect or trust, it might not mean as much.
Exactly. It's about the credibility and the sincerity of the source. A heartfelt, specific compliment from a mentor you really admire is going to stick with you. But a generic good job from someone who doesn't really know your work, that's probably not going to have the same effect.
Right. It's about feeling truly seen and understood, not just getting a blanket statement.
Absolutely. And there's another interesting wrinkle here. Research suggests that sometimes negative feedback, a well-intentioned critique, can actually have a more powerful and lasting impact on your self-belief than positive feedback has in building it up.
Really, it's kind of like the bad stuff sticks with you more than the good stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. A critical comment, especially from someone whose opinion you value, can really make you second-guess yourself. And sometimes that can linger longer than a compliment. It's something to be mindful of, both as someone giving and receiving feedback.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, and the last ingredient in this self-efficacy recipe is physiological and affective states. This is about how you interpret your own bodily sensations and emotions when you're teaching, or even just thinking about teaching.
Exactly. As those butterflies you get before a big presentation, that surge of energy after a lesson goes really well, or that feeling of exhaustion after a tough day. All these physical and emotional cues can influence how we assess our abilities.
So it's like our body is giving us feedback and we have to interpret what it means.
Right. Think about feeling your heart race before a lesson. Some might interpret that as anxiety, a sign that they're not ready, and that could undermine their confidence. But others might see it as excitement, a sign that they're pumped up and ready to go, which can boost their energy and their belief in themselves. It's the same physical response, but the interpretation is totally different.
It's like, am I nervous or am I excited? It can go either way.
Exactly. And it's not just about extremes like anxiety or excitement. Even your general mood, whether you're feeling tired or energized, can influence how you perceive your abilities.
So if you're feeling really drained, you might be more likely to think, ugh, I can't handle this right now.
Right, and that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you're feeling good, you might think, bring it on. I'm ready for anything. So being aware of these physiological and affective states and how you're interpreting them can be really helpful. And interestingly, research suggests that a moderate level of arousal, like a little bit of nervousness or excitement, can actually be beneficial. It can sharpen your focus and enhance performance. It's all about finding that sweet spot.
It's like you don't want to be completely flatlining, but you also don't want to be totally freaking out.
Exactly.
Okay, so those are the four main sources that Bandura identified: mastery experiences, vicarious experiences, social persuasions, and physiological and affective states. But it's not like these things just happen to you and then, bam, you have self-efficacy, right? It's more dynamic than that.
You're right. It's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. A teacher's self-efficacy isn't fixed. It's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
It's a back and forth between these sources of information and how teachers interpret them,
Yeah.
how they apply them to their own teaching context.
Like a dance, right?
Yeah, I like that analogy. It's a constant interaction between your beliefs about yourself, your experiences, and the environment you're in.
So is there a way to visualize this, to see how it all fits together?
Well, there's a really helpful model that was proposed by Shannon Moran and her colleagues. They described it as a cycle, this continuous loop. How you understand information related to your teaching, that affects your self-efficacy. And then your level of self-efficacy that shapes how you approach teaching, what you try, how you react to challenges, and all of that, your teaching It provides new experiences, new information that you then interpret, and that feeds back into your self-efficacy.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process of growth and adjustment.
So it's like you feel confident, so you're more likely to try new things, take risks, and that might lead to success, which then further boosts your confidence. And then even if you face a setback, how you interpret it and what you learn from it can either reinforce your confidence or make you question yourself. It's a constant feedback loop.
Exactly. It's all connected. And while it might seem obvious that high self-efficacy always equals better teaching, it's actually a bit more nuanced than that. Some researchers, like Wheatley and Wyatt, have suggested that a little bit of self-doubt can be healthy. It can push you to keep learning, to not get complacent.
So it's like, okay, I did well, but what can I do even better next time?
Right. But too much self-doubt can be paralyzing, obviously. It can make you afraid to try new things, to take risks. And Bandura himself argued that teachers with strong self-belief are actually better at learning from their mistakes. They see setbacks as opportunities for growth, not as proof that they're not good enough.
It's about having that resilience, that ability to bounce back from challenges and keep going.
Exactly. And it's not just theoretical. Research has shown that these sources of self-efficacy, the beliefs themselves, and your actual teaching practices, they all influence each other. And these influences might be especially strong for new teachers as they're figuring out who they are as teachers, developing their own style and approach.
So they're still shaping their professional identity and their sense of competence.
Yes. And those early experiences, they can have a big impact on their long-term self-belief. Okay, so we've laid out the framework, but remember what I said at the beginning about some of the research methods making things a bit murky.
Yeah, that not all the research has been perfectly clear cut.
Right. That's where we get into the nitty-gritty of how these sources have been studied, and that's where things get really interesting, and maybe a little frustrating from a research perspective. Because while Bandura gave us this great starting point, the ways researchers have actually tried to measure these four sources haven't always been consistent or, well, totally effective.
So what were some of the big problems that you guys found when you were reviewing all these studies?
Well, one issue was with these questionnaires that researchers designed to measure all four sources of self-efficacy at once. They'd have a bunch of questions and try to categorize them into those four buckets.
Makes sense.
But the problem is, a lot of these questionnaires had what we call psychometric issues.
Now, I have to admit, I'm not a research expert. So what does that actually mean in plain English?
Well, basically it means that the questions they were using, they didn't always clearly and consistently point to the specific source they were trying to measure. Like, a question that's supposed to be about mastery experiences might actually be tapping into social persuasions or something else.
So it's like the lines got blurred.
Exactly. And that makes it hard to tell what's really going on, what's truly influencing a teacher's self-belief. And some of these questionnaires also had low reliability.
So like if you gave the same questionnaire to the same person at different times, they might get different results.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a problem because it means the questionnaire itself might not be consistently measuring what it's supposed to measure.
So it's like using a wonky ruler.
Right.
You're not getting accurate measurements.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And then there's another problem, which is that some questionnaires combine questions from different sources into one category. So they might have grouped questions about past successes with questions about encouragement from others.
And that just muddles everything up even more, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes it impossible to understand the unique impact of each individual source. It's like trying to figure out which spice made a dish taste a certain way when you mix them all together before tasting it. You lose the individual flavor.
You can't pinpoint it.
Right. You can't pinpoint it. And then something else the review mentioned was that some questionnaires focused on how much teachers' thought and experience influenced them instead of how often it happened or how impactful it actually was.
So it's like, do you think encouragement from your principal matters? Instead of how often does your principal actually praise your teaching?
Exactly. And that adds another layer of interpretation because you're not measuring the experience itself. You're measuring the teacher's evaluation of its influence, which can be really subjective.
Right. Two teachers might have very different ideas about what's important or influential.
Exactly. So there are a lot of challenges in how researchers have tried to capture these complex ideas.
Okay, so it sounds like there's room for improvement in terms of how we study this. But let's dig deeper into each of those four sources individually and see what we can learn from the research that has been done, even with those limitations. Let's start with mastery experiences, which is often considered the most powerful source of self-efficacy.
Real facey. Sounds good. And you'd think Measuring past successes in teaching would be pretty straightforward, but it turns out researchers have taken a bunch of different approaches, some more helpful than others.
So let's break those down.
All right. A really common approach has been to simply look at a teacher's general experience, like how many years they've been teaching.
So the assumption is that more experience equals more opportunities for success, which then leads to higher self-efficacy.
Right, but the findings on that have been kind of all over the place.
Hmm.
Some studies did find that more experienced teachers had higher self-efficacy, but others found no connection at all. And some even suggested that self-efficacy might actually dip at certain points in a teacher's career. It's not as simple as just counting years on the job.
Yeah, I mean, you could be teaching for 20 years and still feel like you're struggling, right?
Exactly. It depends on the quality of those experiences, not just the quantity. Some studies found that student teachers often felt more confident after their initial teaching experiences, like they were excited about trying new things and getting positive feedback. But then, some research showed that this confidence might actually decrease after the first year, maybe because the reality of the job sets in, the challenges get tougher, and they haven't yet developed those coping mechanisms.
And then when looking at more experienced teachers, it gets even more complicated, right?
Yeah, there have been studies that showed positive links between experience and self-efficacy, while others found no correlation at all. There's even been research suggesting a U-shaped pattern, meaning that self-efficacy might be high at the beginning, dip in the middle, and then rise again later in a teacher's career. So it's definitely not a linear progression.
It's more like a roller coaster.
A little bit, yeah.
Mm.
And that just highlights that simply being exposed to teaching doesn't automatically mean you're having those mastery experiences that build self-belief. It's about how you perceive those experiences, whether you feel successful, whether you see the impact of your efforts.
So just logging hours in the classroom isn't enough.
No, it's about actively engaging in those experiences, seeking out challenges, and recognizing your own role in achieving success.
It's about reflecting on what worked, why it worked, and how you can build on those successes.
Exactly. Okay, so looking at general experience hasn't been the most reliable way to measure mastery experiences. Another approach researchers have tried is asking teachers about their general satisfaction with their past performance.
So like overall, how satisfied are you with your teaching?
Right. And while that might seem relevant, the review argues that this isn't the best way to get at those specific judgments of whether a teacher achieved their goals through their own actions. Satisfaction can be influenced by a lot of things, not just a teacher's own assessment of their effectiveness.
Like maybe they're satisfied because the kids are happy, even if they didn't learn much.
Exactly. Or maybe they're satisfied because they got positive feedback from a colleague, even if they themselves feel like the lesson could have gone better.
So it's more about external factors than that internal sense of, I did that and I did it well.
Precisely. And when researchers have tried to isolate mastery experience in questionnaires, those questions focusing on general satisfaction, they haven't always behaved as expected in the statistical analyses. Sometimes they've even seemed to measure other things, like teachers' general mood or the feedback they've received from others. It's not a very precise measure.
So it sounds like we need a more focused approach, something that gets at those specific instances of success that a teacher can attribute to their own efforts. What did the review suggest?
Well, they emphasize that mastery experiences should be conceptualized as the direct outcomes of a teacher's actions, particularly how students behave in ways that demonstrate learning and engagement.
So it's not just about what the teacher did, but about the actual impact on students.
Right. Are students actively participating in discussions? Are they applying the concepts you've taught? Are they making progress on their assignments? Those are the kinds of things that would suggest a teacher's actions are leading to successful outcomes.
It's about seeing those aha moments in your students, those signs that they're getting it.
Yes. And the review highlighted some research that supports this more direct approach, but it's definitely an area that needs more exploration. It makes sense though, right? A teacher feels efficacious when they see their students learning and thriving as a result of their teaching.
Yeah, it's like, I did that. I helped them get there.
Exactly. And there's another interesting concept that came up in the review. Cognitive mastery. This was introduced by Palmer, and it refers to a teacher's success in understanding the subject matter they teach, or the pedagogy, how to teach it effectively.
So it's like mastering the content itself or the art of teaching.
Right, and the question is this a separate source of self-efficacy, or does it stem from the original four sources?
Yeah, where does it fit in?
Well, Bandura's view was that knowledge itself is developed through those primary sources. You learn by doing, observing, receiving feedback, and reflecting on your responses to those experiences. So gaining knowledge about a new teaching technique through a workshop, that could be seen as a vicarious experience because you're observing the presenter. And then successfully applying that technique in the classroom, that would be a mastery experience.
So the knowledge isn't the source itself, but the experiences through which you acquire it are.
Exactly. The knowledge is the outcome, not the source. And that's a subtle but important distinction.
It is. Okay, so we've unpacked mastery experiences. Now let's move on to vicarious experiences, learning by watching others. How has research tackled this one?
Well, the review found a real mix of methods here. Some researchers just asked general questions about how valuable teachers thought their observations of others were. Others focused on the perceived effectiveness of mentors or how much teachers felt they learned from watching experienced colleagues. The idea of feeling similar to the model you're observing also came up.
Right, like, do I see myself in this person? Can I relate to their experience?
Exactly. And qualitative studies, those that really delve into teachers' own stories and perspectives, they've highlighted how important those early experiences with skillful mentors can be, especially for new teachers.
So having a good mentor early on can make a huge difference in a teacher's confidence and their overall trajectory.
Absolutely. And some studies have shown that things like watching videos of effective teaching or even engaging in self-modeling, where you watch recordings of your own good teaching moments, can have a positive impact on self-efficacy.
That's interesting. It's like, look at me, I'm doing it.
Right. It's a way to reinforce those positive experiences, to really internalize that I can do this feeling. But the findings on mentors have been a bit mixed. Some studies haven't found a direct link between how a new teacher rates their mentor and their own level of confidence.
So a highly rated mentor doesn't automatically translate to a confident mentee.
Right. And that suggests it's not just about how good the mentor is, but also about the mentee's perception, whether they're paying attention, whether they understand what they're seeing, and whether they feel like they can actually apply it to their own teaching.
And the mentor-mentee relationship matters too, right? If there's no connection, if the new teacher doesn't feel comfortable asking questions or sharing their struggles, it's not going to be as effective.
Absolutely. That relationship is key. And the review also critique how referential comparisons have been used to measure vicarious experiences.
You mean asking teachers to compare themselves to others?
Exactly. Bandura argued that these kinds of comparisons, they're influenced by a lot of factors, not just what you've observed. So when studies found weak connections between these self-comparisons and self-efficacy, it doesn't necessarily mean that learning from watching others isn't important. It just means that the measurement might be muddled.
It's like trying to measure the impact of diet on health without considering exercise or genetics. There are too many variables at play.
Exactly. And another thing the review pointed out is that most research on vicarious experiences has focused on observing live teachers, which makes sense. But there hasn't been much attention paid to learning from things like books or articles, what Bandura called symbolic models.
So learning from written sources, from experts who aren't physically present.
Right, or even cognitive self-modeling, where you imagine yourself teaching successfully.
So like a mental rehearsal.
Exactly. Those are areas where more research could be really valuable.
It makes you wonder what we might discover if we expanded our understanding of what watching others can look like.
I agree. There's a lot of potential there. Okay, let's move on to social persuasions. The power of encouragement and feedback. How has this been studied?
Well, I'm curious to hear how they've tried to measure something as intangible as encouragement.
Yeah, it can be tricky, right?
Hmm?
Well, a lot of studies have measured social persuasions by looking at the general support teachers feel from their school community.
Hmm.
Colleagues, principals, parents, students.
So it's like a sense of belonging, of feeling valued and respected.
Right. And some studies have found a positive link between this general support and self-efficacy. But the review argues that this approach is too broad, that it doesn't really capture what Bandura meant by social persuasions. He was specifically talking about evaluations of capability, like direct feedback on your teaching skills.
So it's a difference between someone saying, you're a great teacher, and someone saying, I really appreciated how you differentiated instruction in that lesson. It really helped those struggling students grasp the concept.
Exactly. One is a general affirmation, the other is specific feedback on your teaching skills.
And that targeted feedback is more likely to impact your self-efficacy because it's directly related to your abilities as a teacher.
Precisely. And the review highlighted that when studies have focused on that more specific kind of feedback, they found stronger connections to self-efficacy. And qualitative research supports this, showing how much teachers value feedback from experienced colleagues, mentors, and instructional coaches.
It's about getting that expert perspective, those insights that can help you refine your craft.
Right. And remember that concept of sincere feedback having a double-edged role.
Yeah, how positive feedback can boost you up, but negative feedback can really sting.
Well, the review delved into that a bit more. It pointed out that while positive feedback is important, negative feedback, especially when it's delivered constructively and from a place of respect, can actually be really valuable for growth. It can help you identify areas where you need to improve and motivate you to work harder.
It's like you need a little bit of both, the sunshine and the rain, to really flourish.
Good analogy. And another interesting point the review brought up is that we don't actually know much about how student feedback affects K-12 teacher self-efficacy. There's been research on this for university instructors, showing that students' evaluations can impact how confident professors feel about their teaching.
But we don't really know how it works for younger students.
Not as much. Yeah. And there are definitely challenges with student evaluations, especially for younger students who might not be able to articulate their feedback in a nuanced way. But the review suggests that this is an area that deserves more attention. Students' perspectives, even if they're not always perfectly articulated, can provide valuable insights into how a teacher is perceived and how effective their teaching is.
It's like, who better to judge the effectiveness of teaching than the students themselves?
Right, they're the ones experiencing it firsthand.
Okay, so lots to ponder about social persuasions. Finally, let's tackle the source that seems to get the least attention in research: physiological and affective states. You mentioned earlier that this might be because people think it's more about mental health than teaching ability.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a misconception that this source is somehow less relevant to self-efficacy in a professional context, but Bandura was very clear that it's the interpretation of these states, not the states themselves, that matters.
Right. It's not about whether you feel stressed or excited. It's about how you understand those feelings and what you do with them.
Exactly. And the review found that when studies measured a bunch of general feelings altogether, they often found weak connections to self-efficacy. But when you look at what teachers say in their own words in qualitative studies, a more nuanced picture emerges. They might not initially say, oh, my feelings are a big factor in my self-efficacy, but when you dig deeper, those emotional and physical experiences definitely play a role.
It's like it's not always the first thing that comes to mind, but it's definitely there under the surface.
Right. And the research that is focused on specific feelings has shown that negative states like stress and anxiety, they can be detrimental to self-efficacy, particularly when it comes to things like classroom management.
If you're constantly feeling stressed and overwhelmed, it's hard to feel confident in your ability to handle a classroom full of kids.
Exactly. But on the flip side, positive states like feeling energized, excited, happy, they've been linked to higher self-efficacy.
It's like if you're feeling good, you're more likely to think, yeah, I can do this. I'm ready for whatever comes my way.
Right. And the review also touched on the reciprocal relationship between these states and self-efficacy. Like, if you're feeling confident, you're less likely to get stressed out by challenges. And if you're feeling stressed, it can chip away at your confidence. It's a two-way street.
It's a reminder that taking care of our mental and emotional well-being is essential for feeling confident and effective as teachers.
Absolutely. And the review also emphasized the importance of coping strategies and emotional regulation. Teachers who are better at managing stress and regulating their emotions tend to have higher self-efficacy and vice versa. It's a virtuous cycle. And even things like emotional intelligence, being able to understand and manage your own emotions and the emotions of others, seem to play a role here.
So it's not just about feeling the emotion, it's about what you do with it, how you respond to it.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered the four main sources. Now, the review also spent some time discussing the role of teacher knowledge. Where does that fit into this whole self-efficacy puzzle?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. Because some people might think that just knowing a lot about your subject or about teaching methods would automatically make you feel confident.
Right. And some researchers might even see that deep knowledge as a form of mastery. But the review emphasized that Bandura didn't include knowledge itself as one of those primary sources of self-efficacy. He saw knowledge as an outcome of those experiences, not a source in and of itself.
So you gain knowledge through those mastery experiences, those vicarious experiences, those social persuasions.
Exactly. The knowledge is built through those experiences. But that doesn't mean knowledge isn't important for self-efficacy. In fact, research consistently shows a strong link between how much teachers know and how confident they feel.
So, feeling secure in your understanding of the subject, knowing effective teaching strategies, being comfortable with technology.
Yes, all of that contributes to a teacher's overall sense of, I can do this. And studies have shown that teachers often feel more confident after taking courses, participating in professional development, or simply deepening their understanding of the content they teach.
It's like the more you know, the